Hello and welcome back. All right, so in this lesson, we're going to look at a more advanced option for fine-tuning our selections. So we have a select and mask option here that is available from the different categories of selection tools. Doesn't matter which tool you're on to actually select this option, it's going to work the same for all of them. This particular option gives you more precision and control for fine-tuning your selections when you have a lot of detail along the edges, especially with hair. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to use this. We're just going to go over the basics because it can be kind of complex depending on what you're trying to select, and the different adjustments that you have available will be different for what you're trying to select. So let's just go ahead and click on this button to activate it, and we'll go over the basics. Also, I just want to mention I kept the same selection from the previous lesson as well. So once you're done with this particular lesson, go ahead and remake your selection with the quick selection tool or one of the other tools, and then go ahead and play around with the settings in the select and mask options tool. That way you get a better feel for how to use it. Okay, so once you click on that button, you're going to get a new interface. We have some options over here to the left, we have options at the top, and a new panel to the right. These options up here are just basically allowing you to adjust what you view within the interface. You can fit the screen, fill screen, and if you click on this 100% box here, it's going to zoom in 100%. You can double click on your hand to get back to the full screen, or you can click on fit screen or fill screen depending on your viewing preference. Now over here to the left we have some brush options. We have our quick selection tool. If we need to make a new selection, we can do that with this particular tool here. We also have a new tool called the Refine Edge Brush Tool, and we also have our brush tool. And then if you need to make a quick, precise selection, you do have access to your lasso tool, the hand tool, and the zoom tool. Over here on the right, we have some different options to help us fine-tune our selections. And then over here to the right, we have a new panel with a lot of different options. So let's go over some of the basics of these different sliders. The first thing you're going to notice is that our subject has what looks like a transparency attached to it. And that's because we have a transparency slider that allows us to add or remove the transparency of the selection so we can better see along the edges as we work. I believe 10% is the default. The other thing is we also have a view mode that we can change for different types of views if we don't like this transparency option. So the first one is onion skin, the next one is marching ants, and then overlay, and that pretty much looks like the quick mask mode. And there are other options as well, so you can use whichever one works best for you and your workflow. And then next to that we have three options: show edge, show original, and high quality preview. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so we can better see what these options are going to give us. So if I use my refinement brush tool and I'm going along the edges and I'm trying to add to my selection, we can barely see it, but if I turn on show edge, it's going to show what is actually being applied with that tool. So if I go ahead and add over here, we can see that I'm adding to that selection or removing from that selection depending on which option I have selected up here. And that just gives us a better way to see what's going on. Now, because I did make adjustments in the hair, if I want to see the original prior to applying the refine brush, then it's going to show me the original before using the brush. And then high quality preview will give you a high quality preview of what you're doing versus a low quality preview, which is what we were currently working in, because when you apply high quality preview, it's going to slow down the selection process, and Photoshop is going to take longer to catch up because it's trying to show you in real time what's going on. Now, just below transparency, we have some other options here in three different categories. You can also remember all your settings in case you want to save these settings for future use, because it's going to be sticky, and remember the settings that you applied for this particular image, and you may do another portrait session next week and you want to keep these same settings in place, just click on Remember Settings. So the first option here we have is edge detection, and by clicking on this little arrow, it's going to give us the information inside of that drop-down menu, which is a radius slider and a smart radius. So the radius is going to increase or decrease the radius between the edges of the image so you can fine-tune your selections pixel by pixel. So right now it's set to 0%, so it's not really being used. But if I increase the radius, then it's going to further refine the selection based on the edges of this radius. If we use Smart Radius, it's going to automatically adapt the radius to the image edges. Let's go ahead and change this mode view to overlay, and that should help us better see what's going on. So here's the selection with radius set at 0, and then if I put it up to 250, you can see it's kind of feathered the edges more to better refine the edges that we're trying to select. And then with Smart Radius, it tends to find the edges a little bit better and fills in the areas that need to be selected. All right, let's go ahead and reset this and take a look at global refinements. This first option is going to also feather the edges a little bit, and it's going to smooth it out. And then we do have a feather option, which again will feather and increase the feathering of those edges. All right, so next we have contrast, which is going to increase the contrast of your selection edge. So the more contrast you have on one side, the easier it's to be able to decipher where that edge is based on the amount of contrast. So you can increase this up to 100%, and it's going to give you a much harder edge along the contrast of the edges. Now with Shift Edge, it's going to expand or decrease this edge, and it's just another way of feathering your selection. You can also invert your selection, and you can also clear it as well. All right, then in output settings, if you have color fringing along the edges of your image, you can use this option here. It's called Decontaminate Colors. It basically helps with removing the selections of any fringed areas. And then you can output these settings to a new layer with a layer mask or via one of these other options. Typically, I like to output it to a new layer with a layer mask so I can then use that layer mask to further refine my selection if needed. Okay, so once you have all your refinements and your tweaks done with all the different sliders, you can click OK, and then it's going to output that information as you specified in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now you can see we have a new layer with our layer mask. It automatically turns off the background layer as well, but then you can turn it back on if needed as you're working. All right, so that's a quick overview of the Select and Mask tool option. In future upcoming advanced projects, we will be working with the Select and Mask tool more so you can get a better feel for how to use it for different types of subjects. Until then, in the next couple of lessons, I want to give you some additional real-world examples of how to use some of the selection tools depending on what you need to make the selections for. And we're going to cover some of the different tools again in a little bit more detail so you can see how to actually use them in different situations.